Awesome and good morning. Thank you everyone for joining us here today. We're excited that you are attending Racial Equity in the Workplace as a part of Racial Truth and Reconciliation Week, a program championed by Voices for Virginia. We're excited to be here with you this morning to talk about racial equity in the workplace. I'm joined by three amazing colleagues in the Hampton Roads area, and we're going to start off just by introducing ourselves. My name is Audravette Jackson. I am the Hampton Roads Trauma Informed Community Program Coordinator with the Children's Hospital of the King's Daughter. I'm going to bounce it over to Ms. LaTonya English.
Hi, good morning. I'm LaTonya English, Senior Director of Virginia Career Works Hampton Roads Region. We're an affiliate of the Hampton Roads Workforce Council.
Thank you, Mrs. English. Ms. Verlaine Quinniey.
Hi, I'm Verlaine Quinniey. I'm the founder of the Connect 757, and we're the premier social networking organization for Hampton Roads Black young professionals. So we do social networking events where we bring people together so that we can grow personally and professionally while still having fun. And thank you for having me.
Awesome, Ms. Quinniey. And lastly, Mr. Lawrence Gholson.
Hello, everybody. My name again is Lawrence Gholson. I'm a certified facilitator, specifically with diversity and inclusion. I'm also a published author, a life coach, and a business consultant, and what folks have started calling a serial CEO. So I'm excited, obviously, about this conversation because it kind of encompasses absolutely everything that I deal with on a daily basis. So thank you all for even having this sort of platform.
Yes.
Awesome. Once again, thank you to our sponsors, the Virginia Voices Children Network, and their push for this entire week. Once again, the Racial Truth and Reconciliation Week. You can join us for events like these as well as throughout the week at facebook.com/racialtruth. We're going to start off with just a basic understanding of what historical trauma is, racial equity. As we begin this conversation, we feel this shared definition, a common language, will help ease the conversation as well as help individuals build understanding. Mr. Lawrence Gholson is going to help us define those languages, and then we'll start with some questions, about 10 questions about our own personal experiences, because we truly believe that there is power in our narrative as well as in our own stories. Mr. Gholson, I'll allow you to begin the definition.
Yes, so please make sure that everyone calls me Lawrence. I really, Mr. Gholson is my father, but definitely thank you. And I'm big on definition. So let's start with the definition of trauma itself. A lot of times folks miss it out, and I'm just going to give you what the definition, I'm going to read it word for word. What is considered trauma? A traumatic event is an incident that causes physical, emotional, spiritual, or psychological harm. Now, the person experiencing the distress or the stressful event may feel threatened, anxious, or frightened as a result. And of course, we know with trauma, also because I deal with the foster care system, you know, it causes physical pain, injury, and it also has an impact on your mental health and your mental abilities. So I think that's the biggest thing, is to understand trauma in and of itself and make sure we all are on the same wavelength when it comes to just discussing what trauma feels like, because we can't even get to what trauma looks like until we understand what trauma is defined in context to racial trauma. So when we get into racial trauma, what happens is, the way I do it, and you guys, I'm a facilitator, so I'm not speaking right now. I'm handling this more so from a facilitator's perspective. So what I do when I'm talking to people, or I'm speaking in regards to something dealing with racial, no matter what I say, you have to understand and end the sentence with, and I'm Black. You know, and I think once people, and we're in a good place in America now where we have an opportunity. So this is the place that we as a people have to be okay with our transparency, you know, and leave it on everybody else to deal with whatever they feel, because we have had to deal with it forever. And I'm Black. So if you can't handle Black Lives Matter, then just simply handle, and I'm Black. I have to deal with working in an environment that there are glass ceilings that exist, and I have to fight for my ability, and I may have the same skill set, the same acumen. I graduated from a great college, university. I have the ability, and I've proven my self-worth, and I'm Black. So what happens when you put that into the story, I think it causes empathy to happen automatically. Whether people want to admit it or not, whether you want to call it Black, African, for all my woke folks, If you want to just call it melanated folks, brown skin, all of those great things that we deal with. And if you're one of our allies from the other side, or whatever term you choose to call us, make sure you don't call us out of our name in front of our faces. Make sure that you understand at the end of every conversation, until we get past where we are right now in the state of America, your end comment has to be, and he or she is Black.
Mm. Mm.
You know, and that makes the conversation easy. Because you already know I'm Black, but I'm bringing it to your attention that you need to keep in your mind that is also a part of my story. I can be, and you know, I've had a lot of success in my life. You know, and I'm thankful and grateful for all of it. I've worked hard for it. It didn't happen accidentally, you know, and I'm Black. You feel me? So it works on both sides, not just for other people to understand that, and I'm Black, but for my own folks. If I can do it, you can do it, because I did it, and I'm Black. I'm dealing with racism in the workplace, and I'm Black. I'm dealing with people, they're subtly calling me outside of my name because they can't do it, you know, on a political forum or a platform, and I'm still rising, and I'm Black. All right, so I could go on and on, but that's where I start off with.
I love it.
Yeah, I feel like it adds so much strength to the statement prior to and I'm Black. Oh, I appreciate that.
Awesome. Just a reminder for our participants that are engaging with us online that we may not be able to answer some of your chat questions as the conversation is going on. The chat is being monitored on Facebook.com, and we'll be able to answer your questions during that time. So once again, we believe that created a common mind so we all understand what racial trauma is. And one of the other definitions that we're going to be going into is racial equity. And so we're going to kind of define that as the conversation goes on, and then we'll each be able to discuss that from our own personal lens. And so one of the first questions that we can have is why can it feel hard to talk about inequality in the workplace? And is this the setting for a conversation, and why do you think so? And I'm going to start with Ms. Verlaine.
So I think it's hard to have those discussions because looking at both sides, because it can feel uncomfortable, number one, if you're not used to having those conversations on both parties. But then the other side, as a Black person, sometimes we feel like we're trying to defend or like explain it. And if the other person is not really receptive to hearing or having that discussion or seeing our perspective, it gets frustrating. You get kind of burnt out. So it's sometimes difficult to have those conversations. They need to be had, but sometimes if you're saying the same thing over and over again, it can just start to feel draining.
Yes. I absolutely agree with Verlaine. One of the problems is people are very uncomfortable with what they're unaccustomed to. And I think that's the part that we have to look at. A lot of people aren't accustomed to having to address those issues, but what's happening now has really brought racial injustice to the forefront of everything that we do. And one of the part of the question you said, is it the appropriate place to have the conversation? I say absolutely. If you're in a position of leadership and you have people who are working for you, I would want to know how the folks that are working for me feel about what's happening. I would want to know where they're at. And so I think it is a very important place to be, because racism is not a Black or brown thing, it's a societal thing. And I think until we understand that, the conversation will always be uncomfortable.
Totally agree. I totally agree. We have in front of us right now, because of everything that's going on, including the pandemic of coronavirus, it forced everyone, no matter what your skin color was.
Yes.
You know,
Go with it.
It's really colorism, you know, because we are really only one race, but we have to deal with it from the perspective of what America has defined it to be. So I get that. But the whole world was isolated, and they saw what happened to that brother Floyd. And we were forced, where everyone could normally go back to work and deal with their day-to-day thing. You were quarantined, you were in your house, so it was on the news all day, every day. So for the first time in our lifetime, it was force-fed. You know, when you're trying to get a baby off of milk, you have to figure out what type of food he eats. I think America started eating on Brother Floyd. Mm-hmm. And that changed the trajectory, because when he said, and called out for his mother, no matter who you were, as a parent or as a child, you could feel that. It would take somebody who had no soul to not be able to feel that in his last moment, he was calling out for his mother. So we have an opportunity, and the opportunity of a lifetime only exists during a lifetime of that opportunity. That's one of the quotes that I use. So we have to really harness the energy and not get caught up in what, as you know, there are going to be people on all sides that are going to try to use this for the platform because we have an election coming up, and they're going to try to pull conversations in to make it appear. But right now is the true opportunity. And I do a group called that I deal with Money Talks. And the Black consumer or the Black investor, our money moves America. It didn't just start.
No.
You know, it didn't just start, but we are really paying attention to it now. And that is even effective in the workplace. Like Ms. LaTonya said, as a business owner, and I have folks who work for me, I have set up systems where I manage systems and I lead people. So what you have to do is make sure in your workforce that there is a system where it is already inclusive. It has to be, because there are mandates that everyone has to meet. But what we have to do is make sure that, one, that the folks who set up the system didn't misinterpret what it means to be inclusive, because it goes back to definitions. And if they don't, then we have to reimagine the definitions. So, you know, that's the big thing now. Let's reimagine this. Let's reimagine that. Well, let's reimagine defining what inclusion means and really deal with the root of it. And when you do that, you're able to just be able to capture people no matter where they're from, no matter what they're, because the thing that really separates us is our experiences. You know, it's really not the color of our skin. Listen, I have 6 children, and 3 of them are white males that I adopted. Those are my sons, you know? So I look at it, yeah, I'm a Black man. It's not the blind side, it's the reverse blind side story, you know, and we do exist. And my sons are my sons. And I have a responsibility to make sure I teach my kids, Black or white, inclusion and base it all on love, but at the same time, make sure they understand that the lines are different for us, not because of anything you did or you said, but because of the pigmentation in your skin. And you got to remember that your daddy might not look like you. Your mother may not look like you. So I have an opportunity, and I use that opportunity. One, in my hopes is to make America better, at least for the folks that my family, my legacy is able to touch.
Awesome, thank you for that. So I just want to move into the second question we do have here. And so as we discuss reimagining what our workplace looks like, what are some of the things that you would like to see in your workplace? And Ms. English, I'll have you start that conversation.
Well, I would say on a local level within the office, we make it a point to make sure we have conversations about diversity and inclusion, and not just to check the box. I mean, honest, difficult conversations. When everything happened with George Floyd, I was the first to send out an email to my team. What I would like to see change is that it goes above where I'm at. It goes higher. It needs to be a board conversation. It needs to be a conversation where people who are making very strong decisions about what we do are having that conversation and are being very uncomfortable and honest with each other. I would love to see that, because racism is not a trend. It will not go away. I think people feel like the next big story is what we'll be on top of. But when you're a person of color, you live it on a daily basis. And I think that's the part that a lot of people aren't understanding. So I would definitely love to see it on a higher level with our board members, really having that conversation. And I don't mean like checking the box, even bringing someone from the outside in to work them through what that process looks like. I think it'll reveal for them things that they never thought about, to be honest.
Awesome, thank you for that point. And Mr. Gholson?
I agree with everything that Ms. LaTonya said. Obviously, being a facilitator, I deal with diversity and inclusion, and I did it for the federal government for roughly 10 years. And I dealt with high-ranking officials, and I don't think anybody in this group will be surprised at what I had to go in and front. But it was a reality, and some of it, honestly, were it was implicit. It was just a privilege. It wasn't until it was brought to their attention, and it had to be in forms where people were comfortable with being uncomfortable. So my job has always been, as a facilitator, to room search and make people get okay with the uncomfortableness of where we're about to go in a conversation. Because healing, or the opportunity to heal, because healing is a choice too. You know, if you want to be a victim, you know, if you want to be a victim, you will be a victim. But if you want to overcome whatever it is, then you make a decision to overcome it. So we know that we're not going to get 100% of people beyond where they already are. But if we can make sure that we pinpoint that the majority of folks now are sensitive, are empathetic, and are considering the actions. And that's a step forward when you have folks who are really considering. I have my friends who are of different pigmentations now, they're hitting me up on the side and they want to know, what is it that I can do? How can I, and I say, go back to your families and have these conversations. You know, become friends with people who may not look just like you. So that is the way, and do it intentionally. I have done it intentionally. One of my best friends is a white guy from Louisiana, and we have the best conversations, but we intentionally form and build on this relationship because we organically knew about 4 or 5 years ago where this was going. And we met on a business venture, but we said, you know what? I really dig you. The honesty, let's talk about it. So I think it's important. I think it's important that
Thank you, Lawrence. I appreciate you. Verlaine, I'm going to go ahead and jump to you.
Okay, the one thing that I would look for is representation in the different levels. I feel like you don't really see that in the executives, the higher levels. I think we may see them at different points, you know, within the organization, but the highest levels is typically very rare that you see someone of color in those type of positions. But also having some type of streamline or some type of service or program that assists, you know, minorities, young professionals to, you know, advance in their career as well. So you're actually creating active agendas to move your employees along as well.
Awesome. And so also as a part of that question too, what are some policies that you may want to see done away with, or ones that you would want to see intensified that promote inclusion? For example, there's a lot of conversations that's going on about individuals who have to cut their hair to be able to join into some of the school programs or things of that nature. Have you seen any of those type of policies in workplaces that you've been in the past? And anyone can jump in there.
I haven't had any of those policies. I've been with the Hampton Roads Workforce Council for 14 years, and we haven't had any of those. And we have always been we became very diverse. Let me reflect. When I first started, we weren't as diverse as we are now. But something Lawrence said, and I do it with intention. You know, you have to do things with intention when you want to be inclusive. Like, we don't have policies about how your hair needs to be. This could be my style for the day, or it could be up, or however twist. So that's a great thing. And I think part of that is because where I'm at, you know, I am in the position for the people that work within the center. I see them for who they are and not for, you know, what their hair looks like, or, you know, whether they're speak wide enough, so to speak. You know, you accept people for who they are and look at those identities that make them so unique, but they still bring the skills to the table that you want. So I have been blessed not to really see policies that made me really step back and rethink, you know, what's happening here.
I think that's important. It made me think of when I was interning, it was for a state organization. And I remember a lady was coming and interviewing for like a director, executive type level position. And when she came in, she had, you know, straight hair. It was short, straight hair. And then she ended up being hired. And then she came in with her own hair, and they were dreads, like natural dreads. And for the life of me, I was like, how in the world did she do that? But then after having the conversation, it's those type of things that we're not sure if it's going to be acceptable or not. So we have to, you know, come into the interview one way, and then once we get the job, we feel, I guess, a little bit more free. But those are examples where we have to see that representation, because I'm sure if she may have been interviewing with someone with natural hair, she probably would have felt a little bit more comfortable or had a different idea of what the organization, you know, truly was like. So she wouldn't have to feel to have to do that. But that was several years ago. But certain things like that need to be put in place so that people do feel, you know, like themselves when they're being recruited and being interviewed and things like that early on.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies, for that perspective. So how can you advocate for equity if you're not in a position of leadership? So I know that you all spoke about being intentional and the policies and maybe individuals that you hire, but how can staff who may not be in those leadership positions advocate for racial equity? And I'll have you start it off, Lauren.
Okay, well, for me, being a business owner, I deliberately have created opportunities where I want everybody to come to the table. You know, I build houses, not literally, but I say you figuratively, you build a house and you allow customers to tell you where the sidewalks are going to be and where the windows should be. But it's your house. You build the house. You have the responsibility to make your guests feel welcome or not welcome. And sometimes you give them you empower them. And that's my conversation. So that's what I've done. I'm big, as you can tell, I'm big on conversations. I'm big on understanding where they're coming from. And I'm big on making sure I'm understood. So I start with me and I ask myself, because we all have prejudices and biases, you know, so we have to ask ourselves why, and then create an atmosphere where no one else has to ask themselves why and feel judged by it. Your why is your why, but you don't have to stop anybody else's success because of your why. You just have to deal with it internally. And that is where equity begins. That levels, again, the playing field so everybody can feel welcome and have a conversation.
I immediately, I immediately thought about just different roles, because I think, you know, my group is with young professionals. And so we don't come in in a leadership role or in that type of position initially, right? So little things that you can do if you're presenting, having diverse people in your presentations when you're presenting to your audience, those are like little things that you can do, right? But then also if you're in a position where maybe you are getting the offers to cater the staff meeting, maybe you go with a Black-owned business, or trying to see, you know, instead of the water coolers being Poland Spring or whatever, they're a Black-owned, you know, water company, or, you know, a Black cleaning company. Like, outsource some of those other things to be more diverse so that it's not just the same things that you're going by. And so those are things you can recommend. You may not have the final call, but you're at least taking the initiative to provide those resources to that person as well.
Yeah, and exactly what Verlaine has explained. One of the things that I think is important when you're not in a leadership position is look for opportunities. We have different committees that you can join. One of the things, and Verlaine was actually an active part of it when she worked at the Hampton Roads Workforce Council, was a morale committee that we had. And, you know, we would bring ideas to the table for morale within the office, but that's your opportunity to also showcase things of diversity. Now, I'll give you an example. Last year, I had a potluck, but it was called Hometown Favorites. So you not only told about who you were, where your hometown, but you brought a dish from where you grew up. So everyone in the office had an experience from that to see, wow, you know, what's this or what's that? That had conversations began to happen. People were like, oh, well, I'll taste a little. And then they were surprised. One of the things we have to understand about racism too, every race isn't an ugly person. You have the extreme. You have the ability to be able to teach people who you are, but you have to do it in a way that you may be uncomfortable, but you're giving them an opportunity to learn from you. Goes back to what Lauren say. Yes, I'm from Sumter, South Carolina, and I am Black. And those peas that you're eating with that smoked turkey, that came from my home. You know, you have to, you make it relaxing, you make it comfortable, but your point still gets across. So.
And then you also realize you have way more in common with that person that you may have initially thought, oh, they're so different, or they stay to themselves, or this, that, and the third. But when you're doing something like that, you're like on common ground. So you find that
very common ground. So yes, take those opportunities, volunteer on committees, come up with innovative ideas of things to do in the office, because, you know, the people who are working there don't always have the answer. And it probably would be something we'd be like, sure, go for it. You know, let's do it. And we'll just go from there. Yeah.
Awesome ideas, everyone. That was lovely. And two, just building on that too, are there ways that employees or managers can engage beyond their social media accounts? And the example, just to give some background on what that means, is so in previous jobs that I have been a part of, they're like, oh, tell on social media that we're hiring, share the fact that we're hiring, share the fact that we are offering this great mortgage rate, or whatever it may be in this specific job. And so they want you to say, or even they say with the hiring, that you're more likely to hire individuals that look like you or that already work there. So what are ways that employees can help in the engaging in social media and diversity? And I hope that makes sense there. Can you clarify it?
Well, one of the things that, well, this is what I got from the question is, you know, you have to step outside of the job. You know, we have a 9 to 5, but if your 9 to 5 is all that you're doing, you're not doing enough. And I'm just saying that because, and I know a lot of people have their reasons for not being able to volunteer. Once upon a time, I had my reasons. But when you have the opportunity, you need to be a part of different parts of your community. Before I was even in a leadership position, and this is coming from me, I realized I live in a community that doesn't have a civic league. So I went around visiting civic leagues in the evening and just hearing about what they had to say, telling them about the services. And that was not anything the employer asked me to do. That was something I wanted to do. I was like, why do we have this great information about sending people to school and about getting employment, and I don't see enough people coming through the door to take these services in? And so I would say, volunteer, become parts of committees outside of your organization. Let people know what you're doing. And just by that, people remember your name and you're influencing someone who may not even look like you, but because you brought that to the table, it's like, you know what, let me call Audravette, because, you know, she's come every month. She probably could tell us something. You know, you want to do things like that. And that's how I took the question. Yeah.
And I think of things like this, where you're bringing people from other organizations and businesses to collaborate on things like this. So partnerships,
absolutely,
I think are really important on the employer side, is making sure that they're also in touch with the community. So even if they have some type of partnership with a local nonprofit, to now they can send their employees there to volunteer, you know, that's another collaboration piece. And it also makes the organization, you know, look better, but it also shows them that this is something that they're passionate about and that they're interested about as well.
Mm-hmm.
Piggyback off of what Ms. Verlaine said, I agree. It's you have to see the collaborative effort in it all. Maya Angelou, Still I Rise. You know, to me, that was that poetry was about confidence. Mm-hmm. You know, so anywhere I've ever been, anywhere I ever worked, I went in there as an add value agent. Even if they didn't know what I brought to the table, I knew I brought something to the table. I didn't know what they needed, but I knew if I was there was something I had. And what we have to do is create those environments. And like you said, be an influencer, be an inspiration after your 9 to 5. Go out and make sure that you are creating the culture that you want to be a part of, even in your workspace. Mm-hmm. You know, you create a place for other people's faces to feel welcome. And then the managers and the leaders, you will be amazed at what they see in you that you bring to the table. And you make them understand that even as a culture, we are not monolithic. We are all different. That's like everybody else in the world. So because I think one way don't mean that somebody else who look just like me think the exact same way that I do. We are all individuals. And that is where you stop having to say, and I'm Black, or and I'm white, or and I'm Asian. You know, now we are all people.
Mm-hmm.
Also, once again, well said, and I thank you all for just the variety of ways that individuals can get involved. And just a reminder, if you're in the Hampton Roads area, you can get involved with programs like CASA and other ones, and volunteerhamptonroads.org is a great place to start to begin that conversation. Or other joining social network platforms like the one that Verlaine has, once again, the Connect 757, to begin that conversation of your work, of your life after work as well. And so, just to lean on this, so one of the things that we had discussed earlier is why does of color blindness? And so some may use to say that, oh, I don't see race or any of those things. And so can we help maybe some of our allies understand why color blindness misses the mark? And I'll have Verlaine start the conversation.
I saw LaTonya was ready. I just think it's just not true. Like, it does a disservice to Black and brown people to think that it's not real. To me, that's how it misses the mark. It's just simply not true. And I feel like to be ignorant of that is, to me, I don't even understand how people say that they don't see color. You see color on jerseys, you see color on everything else, but yeah, you don't see color on people. It just doesn't make sense to me. I'm gonna let LaTonya go ahead and take that one next.
Well, no, I mean, I was laughing because, when I hear color blindness, I'm like, that is great in theory.
Yeah.
And theory only. The thing that makes us all unique is who we are. And I don't care who you are, if the first thing you don't recognize is what a person looks like, then we need to buy you some of those special color blindness glasses, okay? Because I think it does do a disservice. I think it harms more than it helps when we talk about color blindness, because you're intentionally trying to not look at a person's who they are. This is what makes us unique, who we are. But guess what? Those skills we bring to the table, that talent we bring to the table, those colleagues we can bring into the table, those collaborations we can bring to the table, you're going to miss all of that because you're colorblind. It's great in theory, but it misses the mark. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump right on the back of it. Colorblindness is a fallacy, and it's an excuse not to see me for who I am.
Yes.
And you may not mean it. You just need to understand. Tell yourself that. Whisper it in your own ear. I should not say that I'm not. I do see color. It's a part of who we are as people to see color. Again, and I know folks see color because example, one of my sons, he's white. He was on a bus and he has a Black girlfriend. This was a few years back, and there was this older lady on the bus who he got off the bus and he kissed the girl and she lost it. The older lady lost it. And she flashed back, what do you want to do? What you doing with this crack and all of this stuff? Now, what we have to do is people understand is that young lady who happened to be Black and he was white, but that young lady looked like his mother. You don't know that and that's why none of us can be judging anybody else. You don't know anybody's story. You wouldn't know me that my great-great-grandmother is a white woman. You wouldn't know that from just looking at me. We all come from something. And it's something that we all come from probably look more alike than it does different.
And
yes, ma'am.
Lawrence, I hate to interrupt, but part of the thing is, why should you have to explain it? That's why we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
Why should you have to explain it? I know these two young ladies know that I have diversity in my family, okay? But I shouldn't have to explain that to anyone. And you should be looking at me and my skills and what I bring to the table and all of that talent that you can miss out on because you use, as you say, a fallacy like color blindness. No one should have to explain that. To me, that's absolutely ridiculous, and that's absolutely why we have to have some form of change.
Mm-hmm.
Well said, everyone. Once again, and I think, as everyone said, it just denies the opportunity for African Americans or Black people to bring their full selves to work. And that's what you want out of every employee that comes there, is to bring their full selves to work. And when you do that, once again, you deny my cultural humanity as a part of that process. And so that moves us into our next question. Have any of you all have the experience of being the official interpreter of minority concerns for an organization, a team, or maybe even a colleague?
I'll start with that, not within the organization, but with a colleague. And this was most recently with the death of George Floyd. A colleague gave me a call and was talking about, really not about the peaceful protests, but about the riots and the looting and about what would Martin Luther King do. I was like, oh, poor Dr. King, now his name is being thrown into the fire. And I had to explain to my colleague that I want you to know this is about so much more than the unfortunate death of George Floyd that we had to witness and see on television. This is about an oppression that has never went away. And the only reason why we are aware of it.
And all systems are supposed to have a measurable outcome.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for that. So I do want to, we have some helpful human resource professionals on the line with us, and I talk about some of these words or buzzwords that are moving around now, starting with culture fit. And so one of the new terms that I feel is maybe halting the diversity or inclusion process is the conversation around culture fit. So we have these individuals who pass these tests and assessments, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But then you get to the interview and you don't want to say, oh, I don't want to hire this person because of race or whatever it may be. And we use this term that they don't fit in with our culture. They don't fit in with maybe the organization around us. And we use that as a guise to block inclusion and diversity. And because the problem with culture fit is when we're in a culture of, let's say, for example, predominantly white males, when we're hiring to our culture, then you only end up with predominantly white males. And so does anybody want to take a moment and speak to culture fit for a moment?
I interpret culture fit differently.
Me too. I was going to say, go ahead.
I think, yeah, because working in workforce development, that's not how I necessarily look at culture. I think because I feel like we were pretty diverse, but culture for us would be, are they customer service, driven? Are they willing to be like a team player, stuff like that. So when you say culture, I think it depends on the industry and it depends on maybe the person. I don't necessarily look at it as just a racial thing when I hear culture fit.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing because I'm one of those people who, when I interview, I do see, I like to see if people would fit into the environment in which we work, but it goes back to what Verlaine said. I'm looking to see, what is customer service to that person. I'm looking to hear keywords about what that means to them. I'm looking at situation, I'll give them a situation and I'm looking to hear their answer because I know the people who are working in our environment, we are very diverse. I mean, it's not just a black and a white thing. It's Middle Eastern, it's Hispanic, it's Puerto Rican. All of us are in the same office. So we're very diverse. And all of those people fit what I looked at as the culture of our environment. I wanted people to reflect what the customers coming through the door would be, but also being able to give them that customer service and that respect and that integrity of the job that we do. And so I see it in a different way. And I think when we think about culture fit, it goes back to what Verlaine said, it really depends on the person. And the example you gave, Audravette, about if it's an environment with all white males, if in their mind that's the culture they're looking for, then of course. But in my mind, I'm looking for a people fit. Will you work with people? Will you be afraid if the person across the counter smells? Will that make you feel like, I don't want to be here? I'm looking for those types of things. So I think it really is how it's interpreted.
And I just want to add on before you go really quickly.
Go for it.
I think that is why it is so important to have the right people in the right positions, because not everyone is going to think like how LaTonya is thinking when they're hiring people. They're going to think, and I think a lot of people do, like the example you gave, Audravette, a lot of people do think like that of just, what does it already look like here? And does that person look like what we already have here? Where it shouldn't be, you know, that shouldn't be the case. So it is important to have people in those positions that can actually make those choices and decisions to change that culture.
Well, I had to look up culture fit because I guess I have been out of the day-to-day of it so long that I was like, what is culture fit? So I had to figure that thing out. So I'm here typing and trying to figure out culture fit. So in my world, it's called implicit bias. You know, I find it leans more towards that, especially if in the military or when I was doing equal opportunity and diversity and inclusion doing for the federal government, they would not have white men in those roles. And they did it for a reason, and their reason was they did not feel, and I give the government military some kudos for this. In the beginning, they did not feel that a white male could wholeheartedly go in and do investigations when it came to racial biases, genderization, stereotypes, and those sort of things. And I didn't agree with it back then. Now that was almost 20 years ago when we first started. They have changed since then. And I think it's important that we understand even that is that people change, people evolve, even white men evolve. But I think what we're speaking out now is more culture is not race. Culture is what is the character of your organization? What is the character that you want to see develop? I'm always looking for thought leaders when I'm interviewing and hiring people. Can you think? Yeah. Can you process information? And can you make a rational decision, even if it's the wrong decision? Even if it's the wrong decision, can you come back to me and explain why you made that decision? Mm-hmm. So I'm looking for thought leaders, and that comes in all shades.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for that riveting conversation, and just allows me to even change my perspective on that conversation. And I believe that that's why we're continuing to have this conversation, so that we can have, once again, diversity of thought. And so another one may be, once again, for our human resource professionals and others, is testing and assessments. And so even for example, in one study that we have read, that organizations where individuals might fail current testing and assessments that they may have, and they still may allow them to come into the organization, even though they may have failed testing and assessments. What are maybe some things that your organization has or does to create a uniform process for all candidates in regards to testing and assessments? Or previously in the past, we know in history, for example, police departments use testing and assessments to weed out African-American applicants or persons of color and applicants. How have testing and assessments in your mind changed in this workforce field now?
We don't have any testing and assessments specifically for every candidate that's hired. The only time we do that is if it's a receptionist position or the office manager position, and it's Excel. So that does not have a color. You either know how to do Excel or you do not know how to do Excel. But it's important in those roles that we know that you can navigate through Microsoft Office Suite and those things. But that's the only type of assessments that we've had. And working with within the workforce industry, there are other employers that do give assessments, but even those assessments that are given, once again, like the work keys, you get a bronze, silver, or gold, okay? Those are the only colors they're looking for, and there's a certain color of that certificate they're looking for. So I think really sticking to assessments that weigh skill sets. I mean, if you're gonna have it, stick to those. But everyone isn't a test taker either. So, you know, depending on my day, my assessment could go one way or the other, depending on what's happening with me. So if you really need those type of tools, I can understand that. But if you don't need those type of tools, it could be a tool to weed out people who are not of the color that you're looking for. But I haven't had that personal experience, so that's about it.
I can talk to in terms of I don't do testing for my business, but I did, as a career developer, I assisted clients in taking assessments. And like LaTonya said, it was not always the best in terms of really telling if the client will be a great fit for the company. Because like she said, some people just are not good test takers. There we go. And then in addition, things are online, then you're adding the video recording, and then, you know, they're counting down and it's a virtual person. There's so many other things where it's just, it's not natural, right? So
Yeah.
people have to adjust to that as well. So I think there's so many other factors that go into play that they may not be the best determination, but again, I guess it would determine what type of assessment it is and what, you know, what the position they're going for. But just in my role, in my opinion, they weren't always the best way to determine if they would be a good fit.
And I agree. I don't necessarily use testing either. I believe in a good old fashioned, let's do panel interviews and we give scenarios. I don't even necessarily rely on questions because folks can give you wonderful interview selves. But if
they're representative.
Yeah. If I give you a scenario, you have to process that information out in real time. And I get to see your nonverbals. I get to see all of that going on. So that's important to me. And I think that's a good way, because you're not weeding out and there's no right and wrong. It's just how you get to your answer and how can you express and explain that.
Yeah.
And does it fit where we're trying to go?
Yes. Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for that. And then as a part of the recruitment process, what are things that employers can do to create diversity in the recruitment process? We know that many businesses have found success at college campuses, recruiting specifically at HBCUs, historically Black colleges and or universities. What are some additional things that employers can do to create diversity and inclusion as a part of their recruitment process?
Don't approach it from a blanket sort of perspective. Again, monolithic, we are not. So because you're going into a predominantly African-American environment to recruit, don't assume that all of the folks in there like the exact same things or going to respond to this exact same stimuli. Like you would do with it. I think the answer for me is to go into those communities like you would go into any community, but authentically do it. Don't do it just because you need me to fit on your bill. You need me to be a part of your marketing strategy. Do it because you see the value that I can bring to your organization or to your campus or to wherever it is that we go.
I agree with Lawrence. You have to be, if they're going to do that, they have to be intentional about why they're going. And I would, as I can say, as an African-American woman, want you to come to me the same way you would come to someone else, but give me the same results you would give someone else based on the skills, the qualifications, and the values, and not because the color of my skin. So one of the problems I see when we talk about recruitment is people think people of color want entitlement. No, we don't want entitlement. We just want the fair assessment that you would give anyone else, regardless of their color.
And reaching out to organizations like the Connect 757 to find qualified candidates.
Yes.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree.
So do you want to expand on that, Verlaine? So when employers reach out to you, what are some of the services that you can offer?
Yeah, so we are currently building a Black talent directory for our members. And so that will be an opportunity for employers to come and actually find a qualified talent pool where they'll be able to see the industry, the experience of the Black professionals within the Connect 757. So that's exciting. I know I've had people reach out asking about, is that something, is that, you know, available? And so that is something that will be under the Connect 757, and employers can reach out to diversify, you know, the talent, the workplace within their organizations as well.
Awesome. And Lawrence, I know that your organization, U Factor Coaching, assists in the diversity and inclusion process. What are some of the things that your organization offers to employers?
Well, what we do, obviously, diversity and inclusion is one of many facilitation services that we offer. We do individual, we do executive, mid-level, entry-level, and we deal mostly from the perspective of getting to a room and mastermind. you know, based on what the organization or whoever the leadership team is that bring us into the organization, what is it that you need us to deal with? And we get a resume from the organization itself. We learn the culture of the organization and find out where the organization's intention is to be. You know, what is their mission statement? What is their perfect picture that they're looking for, and build from there. And we do it either with groups or with individuals based on their leadership structure.
Awesome. And Ms. Lewis, did you want to speak on behalf of the Virginia Workforce Council in regards to the services that employers may be able to gain from connecting with your organization?
Absolutely. You know, one of the things we say about the Hampton Roads Workforce Council is that we're the regional convener of workforce development. And I'll be honest, that's absolutely true. We work with everyone in the Hampton Roads region, from the Chamber, Economic Development, the Planning Council, Department of Human Services, Department of Housing. I can go on and on and on, even with the colleges. And one of the things that we do for employers, we do have a business services team that actually comes out. We can help the employer with on-the-job training. We can get candidates for them. We do hiring events. We've been doing virtual hiring events since everything has closed down. And we can make it either a generalized hiring event, or we can make it specific to what they're looking for. We also look for candidates for an employer. If an employer gives us a specific set of skill sets, our business services team will look for that specific candidate and not just give them 100 of candidates who applied for a position. And the other thing that we do is really tell them about the benefits of hiring people, maybe with backgrounds, or, you know, all the benefits that come with that they could benefit from if they wanted to know that information. So it's just a plethora of information we can provide. We gave some small business loans recently so that they could actually sanitize their facilities. And we gave out a lot of those. So we have an opportunity to really helping a business really get where they want to go if they're looking for skilled employees. And we would love to help them.
Awesome. So just kind of as we close here, the last question that we have here is, what are commitments organizations can make to ongoing learning? And if you could just frame that in regards to the services that you all offer, would be great. So for continuing for ongoing learning and long-term transformation in regards to racial diversity and inclusion. And if you just want to piggyback with that once again in the frame of the services that you all offer.
I think one of the things that the organization can commit to, you know, once again, and I will say this, and I don't mind giving my CEO a shout out because he walked through the door being innovative, is really being intentional about who we are and what we do, and making sure that we're getting skilled folks, and not really based on color at all, but based on the skills, what they bring to the table, the values. And that has been a pleasant surprise for me, I will say, to see that actually unfold before my eyes. And I mean, it was like a slow unfolding, but I think organizations have to be intentional if they want to be inclusive, and not just, you know, check a box. And it has to be an ongoing conversation too. This conversation shouldn't just end today. This conversation should be an ongoing conversation. Where are we at? We started this 6 months ago. Where are we at now? You know, next month, this is where we should be. By the time we hit a year, this is where we're going to be with this. If it's that intentional, and you know, that is my hope. If it's that intentional, we will see change. But every organization and business, including our own, would have to, you know, make that type of commitment.
I agree. It definitely has to be intentional. Partnering, like I mentioned earlier, I think with community organizations, different local businesses, I think that allows you to learn more about your community, especially if you're a business within that community. You're building those relationships within your own community so you can get to know each other. So I think that's important. Like LaTonya said, continuing those conversations and having those action items, not just talks, but, you know, making sure that, you know, you guys are having action items, and, you know, there's goals being set for you to meet them. But I think the intentional piece is really important, so that you're putting people in the right places within your organization. You're intentionally recruiting people, looking for that talent that's going to keep your organization diverse. And I think one thing we forgot to mention is how important the diversity of thought. I think, Lawrence, you did talk about that. The diversity of thought actually helps the businesses, do better in business when they have that diversity of thought. So I think businesses, organizations tend to forget that. But to me, if you're worried about the bottom line, well, having that diversity of thought is going to allow you to be more innovative and bring in those different ideas.
Yeah.
I think it,
And so,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Lauren. And so, Verlaine, are you able to help organizations if they are looking for a champion in diversity and inclusion with maybe beginning conversations like learning circles or beginning conversations at their organization?
Yeah, I think that is something that we would definitely be able to do. I actually serve on the board for their Project Inclusion, Diversity, and Inclusion program, the alumni for that. So the conversations need to be had. I feel like there's plenty of organizations and platforms that want to have these conversations. It's just a matter of organizing them so that they continue to actually happen, setting a time, bringing those people together to actually have these conversations.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Verlaine. And Lawrence, I know that your organization does something similar, and do you help organizations facilitate that conversation?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes back to just being intentional. If there's nothing else that I could share, is that we need to make sure that we are intentional in our approach, that we are holding one another, or whatever your service delivery area is, accountable to whatever the outcome measures are. And we're being realistic about the process. This didn't all happen overnight. So coming out of racial disparity and racial issues is not going to happen overnight either. But it is going to happen, and it is happening. So we have to be realistic about that part of it as well. And network, pull folks in. Like, I've met these wonderful folks right here doing wonderful things. If there are opportunities that I have going on, I need to know and introduce them to the circles that I know, because it's important that we do that for one another as well, because everybody else is doing it for each other. We need to continue to do that, bring each other into different networks. And if there is a network that doesn't exist, create it and tell everybody about it.
That's right. That's right.
Awesome. Thank you all once again for your time, your expertise, and just the conversation that we have had today. I have enjoyed myself truly, and I know that the participants in the chat box have as well. So we just thank you all once again for your time. We encourage businesses, organizations, and individuals to begin the conversation about race, whether it be through this week of Racial Truth and Reconciliation Week or a continued ongoing conversation. We'd encourage you to link up with your local workforce development connect programs like U Factor and the 757 Connect to begin to continue those conversations, as well as your local trauma-informed community network. We thank you all for your time. We know that there are other places that you could be, but the thought that you started to have this conversation here lets us know that you are really in this fight for us and on the road to becoming an ally. And you can figure out, once again, more conversations throughout this week, including later on this evening. So thank you all for your time. We appreciate it. And thank you once again to our panelists. Once again, Ms. LaTonya English at the Hampton Roads Workforce Council, Ms. Verlaine Quinniey with the Connect 757, and Mr. Lawrence Gholson with U Factor Coaching. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.